Alrighty, good evening. Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming and hanging out with me this Sunday evening. Looks like the camera is showing things, including me, which is good. A little bit bright, but I don't feel like messing with the. Oh, I know what I can do. Sorry, I'm just a stickler for the camera because of how shiny and bright and white my head is. And I don't like it when it's just so glaringly bright. There we go. Makes me look unnaturally white, and it's like, no, this right here that's a little bit too red. There we go. That's about more what I look like actually. There's just too much whatever that is. But yeah, good evening and welcome to the stream. This is the second time I'm doing this, and I'm just calling the streams and the episodes when they get uploaded to my YouTube later. Just Give Them Hope, episode 1, episode 2. This is episode 2 of Give Them Hope, which is the name of the game concept that I am developing. And I'm hoping to create this concept and make it really fleshed out, so that way I can pitch it to a developer to see if they'd be interested in undertaking it as a project. And if that doesn't work, then it's something that I want to undertake, and along with help from friends, and learn how to develop myself. And so yeah, the give them hope, give them hope. That'd be funny. But yeah, when we get to episode 3 or episode 4, we'll be far enough into the prologue that I'm writing for it, the sort of narrative introduction, where the give them hope aspect will make even more sense. I talked about a little bit in the previous episode, the hope mechanic, but there's a narrative component to it as well. Yeah, maybe make a movie. That'd be super cool. I'd love to find somebody who's a really good animator and wanted to make some sort of really cool CGI movie out of it or something like that. The whole idea started out as a sci-fi book idea that I wanted to someday write. I've always enjoyed creative writing. I've hated doing it for homework, but it's something I enjoy doing. Just for pleasure and not for the pressure of a grade or something like that from a class. But of course, I'm a huge sci-fi fan, of all types, when it comes, whether it's video games, movies, books. Oh God, I've read so many sci-fi books, and listened to so many audiobooks. And it's just something that I'm really passionate about, and so I was like, oh man, I could take this book idea and I could marry it with these game concepts that I've really enjoyed as a gamer, as a strategy and tactical gamer over the years. And I think it would make for a really compelling design that a lot of other people would enjoy, because the idea takes some aspects from games that that are pretty popular that people enjoy, but it also marries them with a concept to me that is very it is really unique to video games, and almost to the point of being non-existent. And it's my idea got reignited by a concept, or by a game that's in development by a developer that Hooded Horse is working with. I can't remember the name of the developer or the name of the indie game, but the big idea is that you have not only space combat in a tactical strategic sense, but also that leads into ground combat on the planet, as well as ground combat in terms of boarding actions on board ships and stations. And it's something I've never seen. And obviously, like in Star Citizen, because I'm a huge fan of Star Citizen, you can do that in an from an FPS standpoint. But I've never really seen it. Pardon me, little burp. I've never really seen it in a strategy game, and I'm a strategy and tactical gamer at heart. So this evening, I wanted to talk some more about the concept and a few of the things, as well as share some news, and we'll talk about the news first. So this evening, I wanted to, I've started with the sort of the overview of the alien antagonists, in the game, the enemy alien faction. And there's 4 factions within the game. within the game concept, you play as the humans, the Terrans, the Alliance of Terran Systems, and then there are also two. There are two other alien factions. We'll get more into those when we talk about it in the story. I haven't named any of the alien factions yet, but I've started to develop the overview for them. And the first one that I've started to develop is the enemy, the antagonist alien faction. So we're going to talk about them. We're also going to talk about the faction that you belong to, which is the Alliance of Terran Systems. We're going to talk about some aspects of the Alliance military, which includes the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, with a little bit of a focus on the Marines and what makes them unique, because that is who you play as. You play as you're essentially a colonel within the Alliance Marines faction, and you're leading a sort of newly formed, almost experimental unit in this story. And then we're also going to talk about your hero ship and some of the inspiration behind your hero ship and the capabilities that it brings to the game, as well as take a look at some concept art that is in the Pinterest board that I've gotten started. And what features and aspects of the concept art I like and I'm hoping to bring to this ship, and why. So let's go ahead, before I dive into all that, let's talk about the little bit of exciting news that I have regarding this project. And then we'll talk about our alien antagonists. And so I posted about this project. I posted the first stream on my YouTube. It actually got like almost 700 views, so it's did a whole lot better than I thought it was going to. And I was like, I'll just throw it up there, see what happens. And I think part of it was just the thumbnail image was kind of intriguing to people, but it also had a pretty dang good like to view ratio for me. I got like 30 something likes or something like that out of 600 views, which is 1 in 20 on that many. It resonated with enough people, and I had enough new people join my Discord server. I was like, oh, this is something that people are interested in. And so I in the stream I talked about how I was hoping to pitch the idea to a developer, a studio, to make the game. And I had a member of the Star Citizen community. Hey, 07 North End Trooper, good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming and hanging out. North and I were playing Helldivers 2 last night, and the last mission that we were in, we just barely succeeded by seconds. It was a real nail biter, and Dell and I didn't make it to extract. We made the ultimate sacrifice, but North was able to extract with our super samples after he was able to heroically clinch the mission for us. Successfully complete the objective while Dell and I were just getting our asses kicked. So that was a lot of fun. Co-op game nights. Tried to do them a couple times a month. So if you're interested in something like that, playing Helldivers or Starship Troopers Extermination, come join the Discord. Come hang out. We do it pretty often. Democracy first, then samples. Yep. Samples are a close second. Yeah. So I had a member of the Star Citizen community reach out to me and say, hey, I am a artist, and I really am intrigued by your concept and the idea, and this is something I would, being a Star Citizen fan and a sci-fi fan, I think is really cool and interesting, and I'd like to work with you on the project. So he and I are collaborating on concept art for a number of different things. The first image that we're working on is an image that will go with the prologue, and within that image will be your hero ship, the Alliance Marine ship, AMS Nassau, will be in the backdrop of that image. And the idea is to have your character, the Colonel, who is leading the first Expeditionary Marine Force, which is a newly formed concept of a unit. Him and his Sergeant Major are looking out through a viewport. They're sort of at like a 45-degree angle, looking out through a viewport at a space station at the shipyard where the AMS Nassau is undergoing its last preparations before launch for its to go on its first mission after having performed well in its shakedown cruise and all that. So that's part of the prologue that I'm writing, and we're developing the concept art for the ship as well as the Marines and their uniforms. Their sort of non-dress style uniforms within that concept art, and then from there, the goal is to also develop more concept art, or develop concept art for the alien antagonists, in particular the members of the four castes, which are the queens, which are like the ruling caste, the warrior caste, the worker caste, and the servant class or servant caste, in concept them. We also, I want to eventually concept sort of like a star map, like an overhead game map, like you would see in, kind of like in Star Wars Empire at War, which is one of the sort of influences for this game. A big fan of that game from way back. And then we'll go from there. But I wanted to get the ball rolling on some concept art that we could use to help flesh out this game idea and some of the mechanics to go with it, to accompany the concept, and to help drive that sort of inspirational process, I guess you'd say. So yeah. So super excited to have him on board. Goes by the name of Mustang 6. He is in the same org, I believe, as Solus from the Beyond the Verse podcast, who has been on the Archer Admirals and Generals podcast. And Mustang 6 does a stream every Saturday where he does artist stuff. He does concept work. And so this next Saturday, we've had a big old long discussion. And so he's going to be going through the Pinterest board that we've been putting together, going through a whole bunch of the written prompts that he asked me a bunch of questions and I replied. And he's been asking, we've had a really good dialogue back and forth. And so he's going to be doing some of this artwork, concept artwork, live on stream next Saturday. So once I get the details for that, I will post it up on my Twitter as well as in my Discord. I'll make a Discord event. And I need to reach out to him and see if he'd be interested in coming on here, and we can have just sort of a back and forth discussion, live talking about this. And then Nazarus has also expressed interest. Nazarus has some game development background, and has been helping sort of consult with me on different game mechanics and ideas. So we'll see where it goes. It's just a fun sort of passion project. But really excited to have someone out from the community reach out and say, hey, I think this is a really cool idea. I'd like to work with you on it. Someone who's an artist and is classically trained, has experience, and he's also he's a veteran. Was in the Army, and so we have that in common. And so it's been a pretty fun experience thus far. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to switch screens here, and that way you can see the outline that I'm working on for the concept. And we'll read about our enemy antagonist species, and I'll talk a little bit more about them, some more stuff that I haven't gotten on paper, so to speak. So let's go ahead and switch screens. When the transition played, did you guys hear the transition sound? Is that working? I thought I had it fixed, but I guess not. I'm not sure. It doesn't play in my ear right now. I should probably fix that. You heard the transition sound. Perfect. Okay, that's exactly what I want, because if I can't adjust the volume on it individually, and so when I do have it playing in my ear, it's really loud. But if it's, let me know if it's too loud for you guys, and I'll see if I can maybe just edit the video so that way the volume isn't too low or too loud. So I can't believe I brain farting if I talked about this in the last stream, but I talked a little bit about the antagonist species in this game. And so we're just going to read through this, but I'm going to talk about a few more things that I want to add to it that I haven't had a chance to. That'll be sort of written in here. And these aspects of the species will help explain part of the gameplay mechanics and why you're doing what you're doing in the game. So, and I haven't come up with a name, and I'm taking any and all suggestions for names for this species. And if you have ideas, by all means, hop in my Discord. And there's a game dev section within the Discord, and drop the ideas in there. If you've seen cool concept art that you think might fit the description or might be helpful in concepting the visual style of this species and the different subspecies within, I'd love to see it. This is a passion project for me, but it's also for me, it's a fun opportunity to collaborate with the community and other like-minded people, a bunch of sci-fi nerds like ourselves. So if you've got ideas, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to see them. If this is a collaborative project across the board. So the insert species name here are an intelligent spacefaring insectoid-like species with a matriarchal society, not unlike the ants of Earth. And they have developed a caste system as they have evolved. Queens are in constant competition with each other, as only through demonstrations of their ability to influence and lead can they rise in station and status to truly rule a hive. So if you think about how ants and other colony hive-based insectoid species work, there are insects that can release pheromones that and do other things to communicate with the other members of the hive, and to sort of influence them to do certain things. And so that's kind of how the species have evolved. And Game of Thrones, yeah. That it's really, it is this insectoid species where they when they were non-sentient, non-sapient, when they were like the ants of old, ants of Earth, the queens of the hive ruled by influence the other members of the hive via pheromones and body mechanics and sound and such, in order to exert their influence to get the rest of the hive to do what they wanted. Well, that has not gone away, except for it's more of a sociological aspect and less of a physiological thing now. And so while the queens can still, as they mature, they can still exude an influential pheromone that being in their presence lends to, for their species, lends to them being, I guess, persuaded. It doesn't feel like the right word. It lends to their powers of suggestion when you're in their presence. So like when they hold court, the other members of the court have to, they always have to sort of steel themselves to sort of resist manipulation. It's like how men bond with farting. Maybe, yeah. But now it's much more of a sociological thing, in that a queen's ability to influence members of their species sort of gains them, for lack of a better word, street cred. And the more experienced, the more successful they are, the better, essentially the better they are at influencing others and leading them and getting them to do what they want. It basically it gives them influence and helps them increase their standing within their sort of almost like medieval court style political system. And so that's how you become a baroness, a duchess, a countess, and eventually a queen. They all have the same physiological aspects of them. They're born that way, but some of them, lack the inclination and the ability to influence others and to get them to do what they want and to lead them, and even manipulate them. And those ones really just end up being there for reproduction. So a queen will have almost like it's not a harem, but it's kind of like that, except for it's other queens whose whole job is to, once they've been sort of brought into the fold, via influence and such, their whole role is reproduction in order to strengthen that queen's hive. And they are intelligent, they are technologically advanced, but this is how they sort of gain status and station within their political system. And so there's, even though humans aren't as exposed to it because we're on the outside, within their political system there is very much Game of Thrones, a lot of intrigue, a lot of backstabbing, alliances of convenience that are then betrayed and such. The queens of the species are very much political animals, because it's a survival mechanism for them, for their species. It basically helps preserve their bloodline, and make them stronger as a species by them competing in this way. So, let's see, where was I? And while the entire species is ruled by a high queen, the one who has achieved the most influence, even her position is tenuous, and she can be replaced by one of the baronesses, duchesses, and countesses that rule the individual colonies, across their empire. And she can replace by one who has demonstrated greater ability to influence and lead the members of the species. Under strong leadership, a hive or collective of hives can bring to bear enormous military and industrial might. So a queen, a baroness or duchess, countess, can use their influence in order to, at least temporarily, make another hive and the queen, duchess, baroness, whatever you want to call them, depending on how much station they are, they can use their influence in order to make them almost subservient to them. And how long depends on how well they are able to maintain that influence. And a lot of times, it's a lot of work to maintain that influence, and eventually, the alliance falls apart. But for a time, a individual hive can influence multiple other hives in order to achieve their goals. And they will do this oftentimes at the direction of the queen. The queen will sort of like give out an edict and say, I want these systems conquered or raided for, because we want their resources, or we need this many, we need more slaves captured from this region, blah, blah, blah. And the different hives will vie for prominence in order to be the ones that lead that endeavor. But a weakness is the dogmatic leadership system and their near cult-like belief in their own superiority over other species. So the species, especially the queens in general, but as well the warrior caste, are very convinced of they have a superiority complex. They believe that they are more evolved, that they are, that their system that they live within is superior to something versus like a republic style system, which is what the Alliance of Terran Systems is. And they also think that they are superior compared to the other alien species, the other sentient races within this universe. But the queens are also convinced of their superiority over the other castes. They are also convinced that their leadership system is dogmatic. They are convinced that the way they do things is the best way. They are not. They are devious and manipulative, and they will think of creative ways to obtain power and influence. But they are not very creative when it comes to. They are not known for being creative when it comes to strategic and tactical thinking. Both the warrior casts as well as the queens, the cast of the queens. And so they are not. They're not very agile thinkers. So they despite their ability to bring to bear enormous military and industrial might towards a goal as set forth by a queen, they are also can be easily not easily, but they are, especially the younger queens and the younger warriors who are lacking in experience, there can be very much more easily outmaneuvered by humans and the other sort of allied species. But the more experience, the more experience and the more age and tenure, the senior leadership from the warriors as well as the queens, the better they are able to use their abilities and their resources to their advantage. Aether Drift, good to see you this evening. 07, thanks for joining us. This game sounds great. I'll be listening intently just out of interest, thinking of making these insect queens confusingly attractive. Are you saying that you are a fan of the Galaxy's Edge series? The Legionnaire Masters. Have you seen those memes? Oh my God, they're very hysterical. So that is one aspect. When we get to concepting the queens, they're not humanoid insectoids. They're not like insectoids like the bugs. They do have more I hate to say evolved looking features, and I don't want to use humanoid as evolved, but they are more recognizable as an intelligent species in a sort of traditional sense. But you're not going to see big old fake anime boobies on these queens. So you're going to be disappointed in that regard. Yeah. Hey, Blizzard07, buddy. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming and hanging out this evening. But that is a way that the queens will manipulate and use influence, because they do reproduce. Even the queens who have achieved the status of countess, duchess, baroness, high queen, they do reproduce when they want to, and they will use that as they will use that as a reward for members of the other castes who have performed well and have served them well, in order to say, okay, this warrior has won numerous battles, and we want to have more warriors like them. And so they will allow them to reproduce with not only the queen but also with the harem, in order to hopefully they hope to continue those traits within their hive. And so there is an aspect of attraction of that nature. It's not necessarily sexual. It's more of a, I want the reward, I want the cookie. I want the reward of being able to procreate, because the species doesn't have couplings, marriages and such like that. And it is a very the privilege. Procreation is a privilege, and it is strictly controlled by the queens, and they use that in order to motivate not only the warriors. It's not just the warriors. They do need highly intelligent workers. The workers are the scientific and the engineering class, and so they need to pass those traits on to new workers, and hopefully have the most intelligent workers. They need the servant class are the ones who are who make the bureaucracy and political machine run, and so they are not as manipulative and connected, but they are very much almost the political class. And so queens need, they're the ones who are spies. They're the ones, the the master of whispers, but they also, basically make the bureaucracy run. And so queens need talented and skilled members of the servant class, to run their empires, to make the wheels turn, so to speak. So it's a system that isn't just for the warriors. Yeah, no boobies. Sorry. Alongside the queens that rule the numerous hives that control the breadth of their empire, the caste system includes warriors, workers, and servants. The warriors lead their military forces and exclusively make up their combatant units. So whether the infantry units, but also the shipboard units, so they're the ones in the tactical roles. They are larger and strong. When I say tactical roles, the ones manning the guns, the ones who are leading boarding parties. They're not the ones controlling the shields and working down in engineering, but the red shirts are warriors, but they're also the ones that man the guns and the weapon emplacements and such. They are larger and stronger than the other members of the species, on average being a half-meter taller than the average Terran male, and so they're half-meter taller. Average Terran male is 5'9", so they're on average over 7.5 feet tall. But they're also extremely strong. They're 3 to 4 times as strong as an adult male of our species, of humans. And they have several redundant organ systems and a hardened carapace that provides additional protection underneath their combat armor. So they can, not only are they very, very strong, they have significant endurance advantages over humans, as well as other members of their species. And they can also take a beating. So they wear a combat armor system. It isn't just their evolved carapace, but their exterior carapace underneath their combat armor provides additional protection. And then those redundant systems mean that it can take. It isn't like taking down a bug in Starship Troopers, where if it takes a whole magazine, but it will take multiple, other than a headshot, the brainstem, it will take multiple well-placed shots, within that penetrate their core to take them down, because they don't have necessarily, they don't have the same sort of organ systems that we do, but their circulatory systems, they do have redundant systems within them, so they can continue to fight. But they're once if they have taken damage, their fighting ability does go down, their speed, their strength, and such. But they can continue to fight. They just lose ability as they take wounds. Pardon me, got a cough. Victoria, good to see you. 07, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Pasta is not causing problems. No, pasta is just being pasta. We're having fun. But yeah, so that is the warrior caste. They also, like they said, they lead the combatant units of their military. So they're the ones leading the they have many of the same, not same technologies, but they're advanced technologically. So they have projectile weapons, they have armor, they have ground vehicles and flying vehicles that they use. And so they're the ones that are the pilots. They're the ones that operate the ground vehicles, that fire the weapons, that man their artillery, all that. So yeah, that's the warriors. I haven't. When I get more ideas, when I get a chance to talk to Mustang 6 and we start concepting the various subspecies, I'll add more to this in terms of describing them visually and anatomically, as well as sort of like what it looks like when you run into them, what they're wearing. They do not grow their weapons from smaller, shootier bugs. Smaller, shootier bugs. I like that. No, they're not one of. They're not a a species where their vehicles and technology are not organic. They are an advanced technological race, but they are fairly equal technologically with humanity, despite having beat humanity to the stars and being an older species. Humanity, which is a common trope, but humanity has accelerated very quickly and technologically, and but we have not surpassed these aliens. And one way that they have still have us beat technologically is their means of production. They are the masters of mass production. They are real good at it. And if they weren't so selective in their breeding, they would be able to mass produce their troops in a way that we would not be able to contend with. But that's part of their dogmatic approach, is they are, even though they have the ability to reproduce very quickly, they are much more of because of that superiority complex, they lean more towards the quality over quantity. That doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of them. They are numerous, but they think it's more important to pass along important traits for their species survival than it does to just breed like crazy. But yeah, their technologies and such are not organically based. Their technology is different than human technology. They have discovered some of these same things, like the use of antimatter is one thing. They also have shield technology. It is not the same as what humanity uses, but it performs a similar function, but it's not as robust. However, their armor systems are more robust. They are masters of creating alloys. And so while their shields might be able to be taken down more easily by Terran weapons, their armor is very robust. But their ships are not nearly as maneuverable as human ships. So let's talk about the workers. The workers have evolved to not only be laborers, so there are still laborers within the worker caste. They are the ones that do the grunt work, but they are also the ones that make up the scientific class. They are the scientists and the engineers, the ones who advance their technology, develop new technology, the ones who maintain their technology, the ones who maintain their ships and their vehicles, do all their repairs. The workers are also the ones who they do not value life like humans do, and so they don't have a medical core like humanity does. They do have a medical core, but it is more devoted towards preserving the members of the species who have the most to offer, who have demonstrated those valuable traits. So if a warrior who is very esteemed, who has won many battles, falls or is injured on the field of battle, they will devote more resources to recovering them and healing them. Same with a worker who has been injured on a research or a construction project. They will do that. But the it's almost like a caste within caste system. In order to benefit from these these things, like like the privilege of reproduction, the privilege of essentially healthcare, you have to be worthwhile to them. They won't expend the resources on you if you're just a basic grunt, if in terms of a warrior or a worker. The workers, pardon me. They are shorter than the average Terran male, about a half meter. So they're only like 4.5 feet tall. They're not very big. 4.5 feet tall, and they are nearly equal strength. The average Terran male would likely be able to best a worker or most workers in hand-to-hand combat, but it is rare that these things occur. Just because the only times we run into the workers are when they are captured, when retaking a planet or a station or something like that, as well as intermittently in boarding operations. But the workers do not stay and fight. When there is risk to them, they will run. And even though they won't stand their ground unless ordered by the warriors and forced to by the warriors, but they won't stand and fight if they have the opportunity to leave. Just because they are not built for it and they're not bred for it. They don't have much fight in them, but they also don't want to be captured. And so they will resist capture. The workers have the mathematical engineering, problem-solving intellect to match the roles they've evolved into. And just like the warriors and the queens, the older and more experienced they get, the better they become at their job. So the most senior workers, the most seniors of the worker class are the ones researching new technologies and leading that caste within their empire. While they aren't in combatant roles, they can be found in the military in maintenance and other non-tactical capacities suited to their abilities. So if they invade a planet, they're the workers are the ones who are going to be setting up their bases and their machinery and such. If you board one of their ships, you're going to find workers on board, in engineering. You're going to find workers on board in the bridge because they're the ones managing the shields, and they won't be piloting the ship, but they'll be, in the non-tactical functions in terms of making the ship go and continue to operate. Let's go on to the servant class. So the servant class has evolved from tending to the queens and the young. They're the ones who were in the hive and basically were taking care of the young and the queens to make sure they were healthy and fed and kept comfortable and such. But they've evolved to be the members of the species who serve in the bureaucracy, as well as the political machine. But an ever-increasing number of them, as they've continued to evolve, have been turning towards the arts and entertainment because they are still a servant class by nature that is considered, even though it's considered a lesser function, because it's only the only members of the species who are considered deserving of entertainment are the queens, are the ruling class, and so there are very few who are who evolve into this role, but more and more of them are showing an aptitude and a desire to do so because the species has evolved. And as the species evolves and becomes more civilized, they have more desire for entertainment and pursuit of the arts. But this is sort of shunned. The sort of traditionalists within their species, are sort of against this movement. They are not only they're the ones that make the bureaucratic machine run. They keep the wheels of the empire turning, but they're the ones that basically handle all communications between hives. They are the ones who do the negotiations between hives. They're the ones who do the communication. Rarely will the queens speak to other species directly, but if they do, if the species does choose to communicate with the Terrans or whoever, it is done through the servant members of the servant class. They're like the envoys as well, but they're also the ones who basically make the political machine run. So the queens are doing the things that exude influence and gain them the status that they want, but they're doing so a lot of the times through the servant class. they're sending messages, they're spies. It's they're the puppets, and the queens are often the puppet masters. But these servants, as they get more experience, they also do this more of their own free will. The masters of spiders. The intelligence arm, I guess you'd say. So, as the species has continued to evolve and individuals have become increasingly intelligent, the caste system has started to come under question, and there are signs of internal strife. Just like as humanity has evolved, you can argue whether we're evolving or not, but as a society evolves, you start to wonder. You have a lot more of these philosophical questions coming into play, and because you have more servants becoming artists, and they do have they're very apt at communication, and sort of understanding the other members of their species. The workers are becoming more and more intelligent, and becoming able to sort of ask these questions among them. Especially the more higher rankings. There is a sort of underpinning of dissatisfaction within their empire of the way that they are conducting themselves. They don't. These members of the species feel that it is beneath them to just constantly be at each other's throats and competing in order to, and then constantly be in conflict for resources, both amongst themselves and with other species. And they think that through technology and almost enlightenment, they'd be better off as a species. And so there is a sort of undertone of that within their species. It's small but growing. While most members of the species still follow the leadership of the queen unquestioningly and adhere strictly to the caste system, reports from captured members of the worker and servant castes create a picture of growing disillusionment of an increasingly philosophical nature. So when Terran units from the Terran military have retaken Terran colonies or facilities, and in the off chance they are able to capture members of the worker and servant caste, some of them have been interrogated and have talked about this growing sense of disillusionment. And they have reported that there are some in the military, in the warrior caste, who believe it as well, who think that what they're doing is dishonorable. That they are almost have a Klingon-like aspect where they preach a lot about honor, but not all of them. A lot of them don't adhere to it. But there are some who adhere to it more strongly than others, and they think that their system of doing things and the way that they're doing things isn't superior and that it is dishonorable. But they are sort of biding their time and waiting in the wings. However, the internal conflicts of the intense competition between the queens and the increasingly self-aware lower castes also create constant pressure to acquire territory and resources for the ever-growing individual colonies. So the queens are constantly competing for status and position. And so they're constantly trying to acquire more territory and resources, both taking mostly, they do try fight amongst themselves as a species, but a lot of it is also directed at other species, including Terrans. But these, the different castes are more self-aware. Some of them are more self-aware and are having these philosophical questions, and others are like, we're an evolved species. Why do I have to do this hard labor? Why do I have to be a servant? Why do I have to do these things? And it is driving a lot of some of the reason for the conflict with the Alliance of Terran Systems, and that not only are they trying to get our resources from the systems that we have colonized, in the planets and asteroids and all that sort of stuff. But they also it is considered a status symbol to capture Terrans and other species to use as slave labor. The workers and the servants, it is considered a status symbol for those of them who aren't more enlightened or whatever, to have slaves from humans and other species who do their work for them, and they are able to direct them because it makes them feel closer to being like the ruling class, even though they are not of the ruling class. They are not queens. By having slaves and having achieved that status symbol, slaves who do their work for them, if you're a worker in your research laboratory or your maintenance tasks, in the facility you oversee, if you're a servant and you have slaves who are managing running the bureaucracy for you, or doing the servant tasks in terms of serving the queens, for them, instead of them having to do them directly. It's a status symbol, and so the not just the queens, but the other castes are driven to acquire territory and resources, including slaves. And this improves a queen's status by having these additional resources, growing their territory. But it also improves their status when the individuals within their hives in the different castes when their status is improved. And so if a queen can secure large numbers of slaves for them to reward the more senior members of their caste within their hive, it boosts their status. It boosts, essentially it's a loyalty thing. Look at, via my leadership, we have claimed the system and captured, 20,000 human slaves, and I will disperse them to reward you, and so you don't have to do the work anymore. Now you can have your slaves do it, as well as reward you with the opportunity to reproduce. I for one welcome my new bug overlords. Oh wait, you said no boobs, right? I'm out. Yeah, sorry. That is not this alien species. Maybe we'll concept it like that just as a joke. Yeah, and do a side by side. The ones that we have in game and the concept that wasn't chosen because of they had more curves. And Masters, if you read the Galaxy's Edge series and of Masters, the Legionnaire, that's the running joke surrounding him, is that if he sees an alien, he's going to think about how to mate with it. So yeah, that is where I am with this species. I have some basic ideas, but they're not on paper. I'm not going to talk about them now. The other two species, and we'll learn more about them and talk more about them later and how they fit into it. Yeah, calm down, Captain Kirk. They're not green. Let's just say that. They're not Orions. But this is sort of an overview of the species, of the different castes. I'm going to do more about them physiologically in the future when I talk to Mustang 6, and we'll talk about that when we get it out, and we'll get more pictures and stuff to share with you guys once we get to that point. But this is the sort of how their society functions, what drives them and motivates them, and how they sort of are different from humans, from Terrans. They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. They will not have our freedom, our liberty, and we're unfortunately their insides don't turn into oil that can be used as a resource. But our scientists are still working on ways to make capturing them more worthwhile. That's a joke. It's a Helldivers joke. It's not like that. But yeah, so that's our antagonists within this game universe. So if you have ideas for the names after hearing about them, and what to name them, if you have ideas in terms of what you think might be cool regarding their physiological characteristics. If you want to help concept them in that regard, I'd love to see your ideas. If you've seen some cool art that might, go along with this concept that I've developed, I'd love to see it. So feel free to share. Send it to me on Discord, in my Discord. I'd love to see it. If you're watching this later on YouTube, hop in my Discord. I'd love to chat. But this is a collaborative effort. You guys are sci-fi fans and gamers. And so I'd like to know what you have to think, what you think might go well in this universe. Either Drift369 says, what about including something about how some body part of humans can be used as a narcotic to them, but that process is fatal? Ooh, that got dark real quick. I don't know if I want to get that dark, because I feel like slavery is pretty dark already. Because they do not treat their, and we'll expand on that a little bit right now. They do not treat human slaves well, because not only do they use us for labor, but they don't have much respect for life. And because they don't have much respect for for the lower members of their own caste, they have very little respect for the lives of their slaves. Only in so much as they consider them property, and they have some value based off of how useful their labor is. So they are not treated well, and there are slave markets. That they do have within the servant class. You do have the members of, or sorry, not class, of caste. The servant caste they're the ones that run the slave markets and deal in the that falls within their purview, because they manage the bureaucracy. And because the servants can be resentful of the workers, queens, and warriors, that can often that resentment can often rear its ugly head in how they treat their slaves. So I'll let your imagination run wild with how that goes. But they don't eat us. We are not food to them. They are largely herbivorous. They are herbivores. They consume plant life. They're not. Only the warriors will indulge in meat, other animals, but they don't find humans tasty. But they have sampled human flesh. Yeah. So. Moving on from our alien antagonists, let's talk about the Alliance of Terran Systems. And so I started concepting them within the Alliance of Terran Systems within the prologue. This is the prologue up here if you're watching on screen right now. And I'm going to paraphrase this concept and I'm not done with it. Whoops. I'm going to paraphrase this within the prologue, and that way the link to the Alliance of Terran Systems here will have the majority of the more detailed information. But we'll read through it and talk about it as I go, and then I'll rewrite it. Hold on. We have messages from Mustang 6. Let me check those out real quick. Oh, hold on. I'm going to reply to him. Okay. Oh. All right, so we're going to pull this up real quick. So this is Mustang 6. I'm going to give them a follow. And their next stream will be Saturday, March 16th. And I'm going to... They just started doing this, so I'm going to post them in chat. And if you're watching right now or watching later on YouTube, and you would consider, I hope you'll consider giving them a follow. Hey, there's Mustang 6. Welcome. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming and hanging out. I was just saying, I just dropped your link in chat. So yeah, I'm sorry, I just lost my total chain of thought. So chat, if you're willing and able, I would really appreciate it if you give Mustang 6 a follow. Oh, and if you want to see the Mustang 6 going through their process on how to concept what we're trying to build in a visual sense, check them out on their stream next Saturday, and I will be posting an announcement about the stream again on my Twitter, as well as in on my community, in the community page of my YouTube, and in my Discord. I'll put an event in there to remind everybody. So if you're interested and you want to see that, hopefully I will be able to tune in the stream. Dad responsibilities notwithstanding. Mustang 6 says, dude, I am so stoked to be working with you on this as well. I never thought that somebody would reach out and be like, hey, I want to work on the art for this, because I just thought this was a long shot, and I just wanted to get my thoughts out on paper and share them with like-minded people. And I'm just, I am privileged and honored to have somebody want to partner with me on this. And so I'm hoping that, we'll get more friends coming in who want to help us make this a reality. Bring in more ideas and more talents, because I have the imagination. I think I'm a fairly decent creative writer, but I'm not formally trained. I've just got numerous semesters of English, college English, and that's about it. And I read a lot for fun, but it's not something I'm not a professional writer or anything. This is Mustang 6, dude. If I could get out of medicine at this point in my career, and get into game development and do this sort of stuff, especially from the world building aspect of it, world building and then game mechanics, I would do it in a heartbeat. If I had the free time and the resources to pursue formalized training and education and how to do this professionally, I would totally pursue it. I feel you. But got mouths to feed, and I'm far enough in my career. It's I'm not going to be able to make any big changes anytime soon, but at least I do well enough in my career that I can support my hobbies. What you shared is tight and solid. I'm trusting the content. There's a whole lot more coming. As whenever I have downtime, I have written handwritten ideas on a notepad and such, and then when I get a chance, and then I expand upon them and write paragraphs here. And so there's a whole lot more that hasn't received its paragraphs treatment. But that's why I've gotten these names, all these names for things down in the glossary. And so I have little outlines for some of these things and sort of bullet points that will get turned into written words that, from a narrative perspective, are oh gosh, I'm totally flubbing this one on the speaking aspect, but are intriguing from a narrative perspective and from a lore perspective. And so, and a lot of this comes from my fascination and love of the lore of Star Citizen and really many different game IPs. Like, I love the Aliens universe. Oh my gosh, I love the Aliens universe. I am a huge fan of Mass Effect. I've loved Halo since Halo was a thing. I'm not as well read on Star Wars as much as I love Star Wars. I've never been able to really get in the books, but I've read dozens of 40K books. So it's a thing that I really enjoy. But I like the idea. I love the idea of being able to take lore, lore equals gameplay, and ascribe it to game mechanics. So that's why, like when we were talking about the alien antagonists, um, finding a lore reason for their motivations and why they are targeting Terrans, why they're targeting humanity, and it isn't just we want to kill you all. No, they have all sorts of machinations and motivations from a lore perspective. It isn't just we want your planet. It's we want your planet because of this reason. It isn't just a base there are some instincts to it, but it's adds some depth to it. Yeah, the alien art direction is going to be really cool. um I I've always liked sort of the stars and Stellaris, and playing as alien species in that way. And so I'm excited to get started with that as well, because I have some sort of basic ideas, but I'm having a hard time describing, because I don't have a set picture in my head. But I'm thinking that with your help, you'll be able to throw some prompts out there in order to create a more cohesive idea that matches up with what they're like as a species. Uh, I'm going to make some high speed, low drag army. I'll dial it in for sure. Yeah, it's going to be a process. But I think the other thing that's really fun for me about this is so my sister and I are complete opposites. I am the engineering mathematical brain. That is 100% what I do. I enjoy creative writing, and this is about as close as I get to artistic ability. But she is an artist, and she works in nearly every medium. She's done sculpture, she's painting, sketch art, like all that. She's a high school art teacher. She has a master's as a teacher, as well as in art something. And I've always just been, because it's not something that I have any ability for, I have just mad amounts of respect for people who are able to take ideas in their heads and create something visual that that sends a message, that it invokes thought. Oh yeah, we're gonna have the army. I mean, I'm in the army. I'm National Guard. Yeah, I'm obviously I'm a Marine first, but I'm proud to be a soldier and proud to do what I do. But the that's one of the things about the Alliance, and how this and again this influences the gameplay. This is the part of the mechanic for the game. The reason what you're playing as in the game is a new concept within the military, because and we'll get into that here in a minute. But because of the way technology evolved, we had a need for an army, we had a need for a navy, and really for the past couple centuries, and I haven't really dialed in where I want this to be in the humanity's future. It isn't like far flung future, but it isn't like 100 years in the future. It's but we're not a crazy uber scientific, but it's because of the way technology evolved, we had a need for a navy and an army, and the Marines really weren't needed. The army were the ones that occupied planets and defended planets and manned orbital guns and such. But because of the development of shield tech, we didn't have shield technology except for we had what were called gravity shields. It was a gravity shield system that allowed ships to fly around at high speeds and protected them from stellar debris and such. But it did protect them from weapons. And so think of it as more expanse style warfare. And that's what we had for basically up until 30, 40 years ago. And with the discovery of antimatter, and then the advancement of the technology that allows so we discovered antimatter and using antimatter for energy production, and then we developed a way technology to rapidly transfer that energy. Instead of using wires, we have plasma conduits, kind of like in Star Trek, that allows for rapid transfer of that energy. Whether it's used in a city or on a space station or a spaceship, you have an antimatter reactor, and you have the ability to rapidly transfer that energy around the ship to where it's needed. But we've also developed a plasma-based capacitor system, a capacitor technology that allows us to store large amounts of energy for short periods. So you can't just I'm going to fill these plasma capacitors with energy and just store it forever. No, we can charge those capacitors to be able to dump a large amount of energy in a very short period, more than what the antimatter reactor could generate in that same period. So you can generate this much, over a short period of time. But if you store up this much energy in the capacitors, you can rapidly dump that in there for certain things, like the Nexus drive, which we'll talk about in another episode once I write out these paragraphs. But this is why I have these things, because they're all prompts for things that I have to flesh out. But that's how sort of humanity has evolved, because warfare has changed, and this is why this sort of explains why warfare has slowed down, because we have developed the amalgam shield, which utilizes these technologies, which basically has made it so that way fast pass space combat, like in the Expanse and like we would imagine now, where you're going at really you're accelerating really fast, and you're trying to you fire as much as you can at your enemy as you make a quick pass around them, and it's these very big wide orbits and everything, because we have these shields that are so very powerful. In order to penetrate these shields and to ultimately disable a ship, you have to concentrate a lot of firepower in a small space in order to overwhelm those shields and those systems. And so space combat has slowed down, and it's made these space fights take a lot longer. Their positioning is much more important. Utilizing different units and maneuvering them in order to get the appropriate position, in order to leverage the amount of firepower you have, has become important. But it has also brought back a tactic to the fore that hasn't been used in centuries, at least in active like ship-on-ship combat, which was boarding. And so now we've developed enough ability to dampen inertia that we have these shock pods that are used by the Marines. This technology is developed, and at first they were using it in order to rapidly deploy cargo and supplies to the surface of a planet. And then they realized, we can put people in these, and we can use them for boarding. We can use them to deploy troops on the planet. So we are able to use boarding in order to board a ship and not take it over, because these ships are huge, and you wouldn't be able to send out thousands of these things, but you'd be able to send out a small strike force to board a ship to disrupt the systems of that ship in order to give you a tactical advantage, to limit its maneuverability, its acceleration, to weaken its shields on a certain facing, or its power generation capability, disrupt or destroy weapons. That those are the sort of things that boarding allows you to do in this new type of space combat. It is also, now that you don't have the threat of orbital bombardment, because you have shields, these very powerful shields run off of antimatter reactors, protecting cities, protecting space stations. They range in size, and they can be deployed fairly easily, and so this has brought about the resurgence of having a Marine Corps. The Marine Corps had been neutered to hell and back, because there just wasn't really a mission for them for centuries. And now all of a sudden we have these shields, and space warfare has slowed down and become more tactical. Ground warfare, it isn't a matter of, get your ships into orbit and dictate terms with the occasional landing of troops. If they've got shields, good luck, and anti-orbital weapons, which are very common because they are powered by these powerful antimatter reactors and have very long range, even greater than the ships, because a planet-based antimatter reactor and weapon system could be much larger and more powerful than one that's ship-based. So that has brought about the need for planetary landings and the use of drop pods and small drop ships in order to achieve these different tactical and strategic objectives on planets, on space stations, and even asteroid colonies. So that's what's brought about the resurgence of the Marine Corps in the last several decades. Is warfare changed dramatically, because this technology was developed shortly before humanity met this species that are our enemies right now, that we are under intermittent attack. It's not a constant state of war, but they raid us at their convenience, and when they develop enough of a enough coherence to then raid and attack humanity. And it's almost cyclical. So we read to right here last episode, or right here. And so we're going to pick it up from right here. I'm going to put the link for this in chat. And so you can, anybody can read this at their pleasure. Myself and Mustang 6 and Nazarus have editor access, and so they can add in comments and such. But anybody can read it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. You can let me know in chat. You can let me know in the comments on YouTube if you're watching this later on YouTube. If you wanted to let me know real time in my Discord, I'd love to have you be a part of the Discord and be a part of the conversation. But there's the link. And so if you want to read the rest of the prologue up to this point, by all means, but we're going to start where we left off from last episode. But basically, this first section is talking about our main character, his sergeant major, a little bit about where we find ourselves on this space station, looking out at our hero ship, and talking about the situation we have found ourselves in as the commander of this new first first expeditionary marine unit, as well as the taking command. We don't command the ship. We still have a captain of the ship, but we are in command of the overall task force, which includes your hero ship as well as some escorts and the embarked troops on your hero ship. But this prologue, this narrative portion, basically explains how we got to this point, both as a character and as a species. And then let's talk more about the Alliance of Terran Systems, the Alliance military, and what's sort of driving all of this. So let's see, where were we? So you are getting ready to deploy to a region of space called the Reach, which is basically where the outer colonies are, the ones that largely don't have representation within the Alliance Senate. They are colonies that are often rich in resources, a lot of very hardy people out there. They're not on what's called the Nexus Bridge Network. so they're not connected by like a system similar, kind of like a hyperlane system. You can still travel to those systems, but you have to do it via a ship equipped with a Nexus drive, which are very large. They're only basically very large ships, capital class and above, that are equipped with these ships. So the very few very few freelance entities own ships this big. Most freelance people have smaller ships, and they stick to within system travel or intersystem travel via the Nexus Bridge Network system, via the Nexus Bridge Network. But in order to get to these systems, you have to essentially be on one of these super capital ships, or a smaller ship can piggyback alongside that ship to use the Nexus drive field that they've created to traverse what's called the Nexus. Is what I'm calling interspace in this universe. So let's see. But your mission as the commander of this unit is to deploy to the Reach, which is a region of space, which is where the outer colonies are, in order to be able to serve as sort of a rapid reaction force, or at least this is the briefed mission. I can't imagine how it might get more intriguing. Intriguing from there. But a region at the edge of Alliance space closest to the Empire of the insert species name here. It was here that the newly formed 1st Expeditionary Marine Force would be tested for the first time as a unit. Many of the Marines and their auxiliaries have already seen combat, with many of them having spent years on numerous deployments on the front, with the threat of the insert species name here always close at hand. But this would be the trial by fire of the new concept that, while proven in theory and even as individual elements in multiple combat operations, was still in its infancy. The concept being the 1st Expeditionary Marine Force, which is basically reviving the concept of the Marine Air Ground Task Force that we have today. The Marine Expeditionary Unit, Expeditionary Brigade, Marine Expeditionary Force of the very similar in what they do, but with a futuristic spin. Basically to be a force in readiness that is forward deployed in regions of space that are not served by static bases. And there are Navy units that are deployed and on patrol in this region, but those Navy units don't have the ability to deploy ground troops. And the Army does have Army bases in colony systems of the more established colonies, the ones that are on the Nexus Bridge Network. But they do have the ability to forward deploy, but it takes them longer to deploy, to embark on their troop ships. They then have to be escorted by the Navy. They're not a rapid response force, but the Army is much. The Marine Corps is being. They're trying to rapidly expand the size of the Marine Corps, but it is still designed to be a force in readiness, not a massive force like the Army and the Navy. They aren't meant to occupy space. They aren't meant to occupy planets. They're meant to be a force in readiness, a rapid reaction force that can deploy quickly to help combat the threat of this enemy species. Because when they raid and when they attack human colonies, they do so without warning. And so we need to be able to respond quickly to protect these colonies. And we can't just build a base everywhere. We can't just leave a fleet in orbit at all times. Hey, Papa Juggernaut 07, thanks for joining me. Thanks for coming and hanging out. My second favorite wood. I am doing well. How are you, buddy? Hope you had. I caught a little bit more of your stream before I had to crash the other night.
Part of the crew.
Oh, thanks for the follow. Thanks for the support. Awesome.
Part of the ship. Part of the crew.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
So this evening, Papa Juggernaut, I'm not playing a game. We are concepting a game. I'm writing this concept and creating a concept that I want to see developed. And so we are doing world building this evening and applying some of that world building to how the game mechanics will work. And I don't know if he's still in chat, but I've partnered with another member of the Star Citizen community who's an artist to work on some of the concept art for this universe that I'm creating, this game world that I'm creating to go with this concept. And hopefully the goal is to eventually make it be a very well formed pitch to submit to a developer. To say, hey, I think this would make a great game. I've created I've done the universe building. I've partnered with people who have created compelling concept art, for not only the universe and the species and technology within it, but also some of the gameplay aspects. And in order to illustrate the game mechanics, in the hopes that a developer might be like, oh, this is a cool idea. I think we should work on this. And if I can't get a developer to work on it, it's something that I want to, would like to continue to work on with people that I partner with in order to develop it myself. Learn some game development, work with artists like Mustang 6 in order to create assets to make it a thing. I appreciate your support, man. Thank you. Yeah, the first episode of this sort of world building thing that I'm doing is up on my YouTube. If you're interested, just at Tree0311 on YouTube. But just going to be continuing to share the process here as it goes on. A lot of this is written on my end, but I'm working with Mustang 6 to. Sorry, I'm a bad streamer. I don't have all the things set up. Where's the command? I apologize. Yeah, where's my mod? Mod, you're supposed to take care of these things. No, I'm a bad streamer. I don't have all the fancy commands set up. I really should take the time to do that. But, dad life. So it is what it is. But yeah, we're going to be sharing this process as we go through it. And I'll also be hyping up Mustang 6 when he does his streams, doing the visual aspects of the concept art and creating that. From our discussions. And then I'm hoping to eventually bring Mustang 6 on here to talk about things as we sort of brainstorm together, as well as my friend Nazarus, who's with me on the Pathfinders podcast, who has some game dev experience, and we'll be talking about some of the game mechanics and fleshing those out in a more complete way. So yeah, let's keep reading because we're talking about the Alliance of Terran Systems, the Alliance military, particularly the Alliance Marines, and some of the things that make them make them tick, make them work, how they sort of exist, and what role they play in this universe, and how that manifests in terms of gameplay. So the first Expeditionary Marine Force was formed to fill a role that the Alliance had desperately needed. The Sol system sat comfortably far from the space occupied by the insert species name here. Still trying to come up with a name for our enemies. But most of human expansion had been in that stellar direction after making peaceful first contact with the insert species name here. So I've got two other species within this universe. Spacefaring intelligent species. Here, let's see. Hold on, we'll pull up the YouTubes. View my channel. Should we? Here we go. Link in chat. Go. And let's see, where was I? So yeah, we, prior to meeting and making not peaceful first contact with our enemies, we did encounter two other intelligent species, spacefaring species, that we had established peaceful first contact with. One species, we have established very Here, we'll move this over here. We've established really good trade relations with them in terms of resources. They're not overly friendly or gregarious, but we have trade agreements with them. We have a mutual defense pact with them. They are not a militant or what's the other word for that? They're not really a martial species. Oh, already a subscriber. Thanks so much for the support. Do you have a YouTube? If you have a YouTube, I'll drop a sub your way as well. But yeah, the first species that we made contact with, we are very cordial with, but they're just not like they're not like the Banu, where they're very outgoing and gregarious and such. They're much more reserved, but we do enjoy a very profitable trade relationship with them, and we do come to each other's mutual defense, because while this species, not very much of their space is sort of within range of our mutual enemy, they have been the victims and continue to be the victims of attacks by this species, and they have been the members of their species have been captured and enslaved, and they have lost systems to this enemy species. And sort of, if you think about it, and this is another thing that I'm looking forward to working with Mustang 6 on, is the star map, because if you think about it, human space is sort of like an oval like this in the center of the star map, and our first contact species sort of comes down and around like this and makes contact with our enemies up here, and the other species sort of comes down like this, and we do share a small regional border of space with them up here, and then they come up this way, and they also have contact with this enemy species. And so this second species that we've made contact with, our relationship with them is more cold. We do have a mutual defense pact with them. How beneficial it's been is really not even up for debate. They have not come to our defense all that often. It's more of been a token defense. We do trade with them in a limited capacity, but they are more they're more reserved, and they don't engage with outsiders as much. It's more of a just like a do we have to kind of thing. How long have we been spacefaring at this point in this lore? So I haven't nailed down a date yet, but I'm thinking that we're probably if we in the lore we develop and it's in the lore we do develop a Alcubierre type drive. If it's we're 2024 right now, in the next 120 150 years, and so we are starting to we're pushing further out into the solar system in the next 50 to 100 years, and then within the next 150 years we have had the ability to basically largely colonize the solar system. Mars has been colonized. We've colonized, established numerous asteroid colonies as well as lunar colonies, like the Jovian moons and such. And so Sol, as of the 22nd century, has been very much explored. We're exploiting the resources. Mars has ballooned in population, as well as some of the Jovian moons. And then we do establish over, that's, I'd say the 23rd century would be the 2200s, right? Yeah, the 23rd and 24th centuries, we send out colony expeditions via our Alcubierre type drive, which is able to achieve at max impulse about 2C. Above that, and it starts the fuel efficiency just absolutely plummets. The whole law of diminishing returns. That's how I'm sort of establishing this lore. And so we are able to achieve max of about 2C, 2 times the speed of light. But our Alcubierre type drive is limited by our ability to transfer energy within the 22nd century. And so we are using fusion type reactors to generate energy, but we have not developed sufficient technology to rapidly transfer that energy to build up these fields to rapidly accelerate to this speed, or to the speed of 2C, but also the ability to go above that. It becomes too taxing, and it's not efficient or effective to go faster. And it does take time. So even though we were able to go 2 times the speed of light, and we could reach the outer reaches, if we're able to accelerate to that speed quickly, we could reach the outer reaches of our solar system within a couple hours. But because the acceleration is slow to reach that speed, it still takes numerous hours, a good chunk of the day to reach the outer system. And it even takes a couple hours, basically almost an hour or so, to go from Earth to Mars, and several hours to go from Earth, Mars local to the Jovian moons or the asteroid belt, if that makes sense. So getting around the solar system is within the 22nd and 23rd century is very much almost equivalent to travel time wise of getting around our Earth right now. You can fly to the other side of the planet within a day. Exactly. Yes, Papa Juggernaut. So here, I'm going to pull up the image, because when developing this, I grabbed some concept art and I started reading about these technologies and how could I manipulate them to make it believable within the universe and sort of fit the progression of the lore. So let's see. Open up this tab. So I thought this was a pretty cool image. Oh, I don't want to open it up in Paint. Hold on, we'll open it up with photos. There we go. So this is... Okay, yeah, you guys can see that. Cool. So this is a chart that I found online, and it looks pretty accurate from what I've seen, but this is basically gives a cool representation of from Earth to the Sun, Earth to Mercury, Venus, the Moon, Mars, how long at the speed of light it would take to travel to Mars. And so if we're going at the speed of light, 1C, it only takes light from Earth to reach Mars and vice versa 4.5 minutes, or just under 4.5 minutes. But because we can't rapidly accelerate to that speed, it still takes, let's say, hour and a half, 2 hours. It's like flying from, Boise to Los Angeles for me. But we're, obviously the flight time to Jupiter, it's 35 minutes. And so going to the Jupiter and some of the, Saturn, the Jovian moons, those colonies out there, it would be like flying, I guess we would say, probably like going from, the US to Europe would be a good analogy. And then to, the Kuiper belt, this would be the equivalent of like going to the opposite side of the planet, like a 24, a day long trip, maybe a little bit longer, depending on where in the belt you're going. Does that make sense? But then we have in the 20, it would be the late 2200s into the early 2300s, Conqueror merits. Yeah. In the late 2300s, early 2400s ish is when we establish our first extrasolar colonies. using we send out colony ships that are flying at nearly 2C, nearly max 2C, essentially the most efficient and safe speed, like 1.7, 1.8C, and we establish colonies on several planets with it was sort of like Alpha Centauri, Proxima Centauri, Barnard Star type range, where it takes a couple years to get there. At our speed, at the speeds we're capable of, but we send out these massive colony ships, after discovering that there aren't habitable planets, but not like Earth habitable planets, but there are planets where we are able to build colonies in sealed arcologies, as well as within asteroid colonies and such, and colonize these extrasolar systems and this establish an extrasolar presence. But then in the late 2400s is essentially when, give or take, when we develop the discover antimatter. And it's a series of experiments that first, after discovering antimatter, that we are able to, we've got antimatter. Now we can generate lots of energy, and fusion was great. But now we've got antimatter. It's even better. It's even more powerful. But we're still very limited by our ability to transmit that energy as well as store. And then a series of experiments develop a plasma technology that allows us to rapidly transmit that energy via plasma conduits, but also store for short periods large amounts of energy, greater than what we're able to produce over that same short period, for use. And those experiments not only allow us to develop they allow us to develop more powerful weapons and everything, but this is what the power that we're able to generate and transmit and store is what allows us to establish a nexus bridge. And a nexus bridge is what our we already have faster than light travel, but it's still very limited. It's not, it's law of diminishing returns after once you approach 2C, but greater than that to reach more distant stars. And basically the nexus is what we have named interspace, a higher space-time in this universe, and we call it the nexus. And we are able to using an antimatter reactor to then transmit energy via plasma conduits to plasma capacitors. We're able to generate a whole bunch of energy and then discharge it into creating this bridge between two systems through interspace. And so what we're able to do is create a bridge from an area you can only do it in certain parts of a system that are far enough away from a gravity well. Not the same nexus that Guinan talked about, but that's kind of where the name came from. But it's the name for whether you want to call it interspace, hyperspace, it's space-time, the warp, but lacking the demons. And so far we haven't discovered any life or anything like that in it. It just allows us to, we're able to open up this bridge, and it requires a lot of significant, the antimatter reactors are big. But in order to create this bridge, and the bridge is the name for this opening in inner space that connects. You're creating an opening at one point in space, connected to an opening at another point in space through interspace. And so what this does is you're able to discharge this energy to create this opening after calculating the endpoint, and then enter you're basically able to enter that bridge, but it is an instantaneous travel. it still takes time to travel that distance. But because we're going at many, many times the speed of light, we're able to connect distant star systems. Now, if you're doing this via ship, well, you have to have massive, power generation capacity in the form of multiple antimatter reactors, as well as massive storage capacity in the form of the plasma capacitors, and then antimatter reactors and plasma capacitors. But then you also have to have the device that the Nexus drive itself. And I haven't played around too much with the idea of what that looks like in terms of a ship. All I know is that it's large, has to be shielded within a ship, and so you can't outfit smaller ships with this device. It doesn't work. You don't have the space on a smaller ship to store the drive, let alone the power generation and power storage and discharge capacity to create this. And so once we developed this technology, we were able to send colony ships out to far distant systems. And what happens is you are able to open this bridge and then transit the bridge. It's not it's not just a portal, but you are able to open the bridge and enter the bridge and then transit through interspace. And the farther away a system, the more power is required to be generated, thus consuming more antimatter fuel. But also, the farther away it is, the more time it takes to transit interspace, because it isn't it isn't just a point to point. It isn't a narrow connection. It's just a bridge between, and transiting this way is a lot shorter. So it still takes hours to even days to reach these to reach other human colonies. But it's it's hours and days versus it's taken that same transit time that it took us to reach the outer solar system. We can now reach far-flung colonies. And so this has allowed for a rapid expansion of human influence, in the 2400s. And so over the 2400s, 2500s, lots of colonies being formed, a massive expansion in Terran space. This is when the Alliance of Terran Systems was founded, and colonies are getting big enough that they are achieving representation within the Alliance Senate, because it wasn't just Sol and these very lightly populated extrasolar colonies. You have planets that have been terraformed, and you have colonies and planets whose populations they don't rival Earth and Mars yet, but they're getting into the tens and hundreds of millions. I think maybe even a couple of them might even have low billions of people. Because after we developed this drive for ships, we by being able to colonize these extrasolar systems, these drives require a lot of rare earth metals, and so they are cost prohibitive to create for a ship, which is part of the other reason that they're only equipped on certain capital class ships. And so at first it was just colony ships sponsored by the Terran government, and military ships. And now, as we've been able to colonize more systems and gain access to more of these rare earth metals to create these drives, we've also been able to make it financially feasible for large corporations to operate basically cargo ships and transport ships with these drives. Not a lot of them, but they are out there. And so it's basically, think about it, the number of ships that are able, the number of freight and transport companies that are able to operate these large super freighters on Earth. We've got a couple thousand of them. Think about it, across the breadth of human space, we've only got a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand of these super freighters that are able to transit from extrasolar system to extrasolar system. But those are largely used to reach the outer colonies, because the more established colonies, the older colonies, are now connected via the Nexus Bridge network. We have, not only do we have more of these rare earth metals to create these drives on ships, but we've also been able to construct permanent fixtures in space at the systems where it is more financially feasible to do so, in order to allow for intersystem transit, moving people, moving supplies within the Alliance. And so these older colonies with the larger populations that are more established, they have a Nexus Bridge, a permanent Nexus Bridge. Makes it so that way smaller ships can transit from system to system. But we still have these large corporations that are doing business in the outer colonies, bringing resources back from these more sparsely populated colonies to the larger colonies, back to the solar system, where they can be utilized at the more established colonies, where they have the greater means of industry and production. But because the capacity for harvesting these resources in these systems hasn't grown, because there aren't habitable planets or planets that are able to be terraformed in these systems, it isn't fiscally viable to build a Nexus Bridge connecting those systems. And so it's still the only way to get to those systems is to piggyback your smaller ship via the Nexus Bridge of a larger ship, whether it's a military ship or a corporate transport. And so these corporate transports will essentially charge a fee for these smaller freelance operators to transport people, transport goods, and such along with them. They call it a parasite fee. You're paying a toll, whatever you want to call it. So that is how, if you can imagine. Here, I'm going to pull up an image. A parasite fee, yeah, because your ship is essentially a parasite ship. You can't transit from the system that isn't on the Nexus Bridge network. You can't transit to one of those systems without a ship that has this drive. And so the ship that's going there will use their drive to create the Nexus Bridge, and then they and a certain number of other ships based off of mass can enter the Nexus Bridge in transit to that other system. Yeah, I've been battering around this idea for a long time, and it's been very loose for a long time. And now that I've had the time to flesh it out, I've been reading about, different, I found a cool video that talked about different science fiction drives and sort of gates, whatever you want to talk about, call it. And so I've been sort of fleshing it out in my head, and now I've been writing it out. And so right now it's bullet points, but the way I've explained it to you guys will get written in a narrative sense in order to put down here within my glossary of terms. And it'll be, it won't be as long, but it'll make sense in a narrative sense. But it won't be as long-winded of a description. Let's see, where's the map? And so I found this picture. And this artist, here, I'm going to find the link to the artist too. Let's see. I got to find where I put that link. Hold on. Because you gotta give credit where credit's due. So let's see. I'm going to put the link to their page in the chat. Mustang 6 says, I just finished Contact, a bridge version yesterday, and I have all this swimming in my head too. Oh, cool. Yeah, so this is, Juggernaut says, looks conceptually like the Starfield travel map. Yeah, great story. And this is, here, I'll put the link in chat for you guys. And I'll put the link, if you're watching later on YouTube, the link will also be in the comments. So you'll recognize this from the sort of the thumbnail image that I created. But this is sort of inspired by the map from Homeworld, and so I like this idea in that as a concept, you would have systems where if it has a Nexus bridge, the system will be marked in a certain way, and then you'll have a hard lane drawing it to other Nexus bridge connected systems. And then I like the idea of a very faint line or a dashed line that allows it that shows where the routes that you can take from these systems to non-Nexus bridge systems. And so not only is there lore for this, but this is gameplay, because in the game you'll have your task force. So your hero ship and its escorts, and your hero ship has a Nexus drive. And so you can go from one of these systems on the Nexus Bridge network to a system that isn't. These systems out in the Reach, the outer colonies. And you can transit to those systems and then in between those systems in order to respond to requests for aid. They've come under attack. There's a natural disaster of some sort. Various different mission opportunities within the game as part of your mission set, just like a Marine Expeditionary Force would now. When I was a Marine, I deployed on as part of 2 Marine Expeditionary units, and I saw a lot of combat in Iraq, but we also did training with lots of different militaries. I did humanitarian operations. Like I went to the Philippines after a typhoon, and we did humanitarian operations. So it isn't just combat missions. And on that humanitarian mission, we delivered supplies, we evacuated people, we provided medical aid. Those are different gameplay elements that you would be able to undertake at mission elements with your task force. Yeah, 07. Thank you very much, Papa Juggernaut. I appreciate it. Yeah, and Mustang 6 is also a veteran, an Army veteran. So that's a key part of our partnership and something I'm proud of. We've got the lore for it, and that lore is what makes the gameplay work, because you have to decide as the commander how you deploy your forces, because you can take a certain number of ships with you. You're deploying as a task force, and basically all the ships within your task force can transit the Nexus bridge with you. But you will, in the campaign, have the opportunity to recruit additional units. You can't create additional units, but there will be limited opportunities to recruit additional units, both naval units or ship units, as well as ground-based units. And so those ground-based units will be able to embark on board your task force as well as other ships that you recruit, so that way you can deploy them elsewhere. The only problem is you will only ever have one of your hero ship with this Nexus Bridge drive. So what you can do is, if you do recruit additional units, you can leave some of your units from your task force to, say, guard and protect the system that you have rescued, that you have served. Maybe pirates were attacking, and you can leave them in that system. That way they could, if an event occurs within that system, you can basically, you could play that combat or that event with those units, or you could auto-resolve it. If you've left a destroyer, 2 frigates, and 2 corvettes in this system out here, and your task force is over here. An event happens, you can auto resolve it if they have the resources there. It's a combat thing, and you have sufficient resources. You can tell them to essentially retreat. They won't be able to retreat back here, but they can avoid contact until you can come back and handle the event. But if you bring units back here to this Nexus Bridge system, they can only transit by themselves to other Nexus Bridge connected systems. So they could handle, if you are, say there's an outer colony here, you're deep in the deep in the Reach, and you're here with your task force with your hero ship, an event occurs over here in this system, in a Nexus Bridge connected system, and you have units over here. You're in the world map, and you can direct them to go over here via the Nexus Bridge network to respond, and you could have them auto-resolve, or you could play this mission. You pause whatever you're doing over here. You're zoomed into the system map over here. You zoom out to the galaxy map. These units transit over here, and you zoom into that system map, and then you do that mission. You do that whatever that job is, or you could auto resolve it if you think that you have sufficient resources there. And that's not just ships. That's ground resources. So your escorts will have a limited ability to embark and deploy ground troops. And so if pirates attack a station out here and they board and take over that station, you could send, a small task force of, a destroyer and 2 frigates, here with, several Marine platoons to destroy the pirate, ships, and then board that station and retake control of it. That's sort of what I'm thinking. Or they could deploy to provide, security on a planet that is experiencing an uprising. Experience for a governor that's been providing support to you. Think about things on that sort of on that line. So let's see, where were we? Oh man, that was a long tangent. I forgot where I was. So, that's where we're at sort of present day. An opportunity. When I was in Iraq, my unit trained the very first battalion of the new Iraqi National Guard. Boy, was that was a headache. Yeah. So let's keep reading. I've sort of gotten us caught up to where we are in the lore and talking about where that leads us with the mission and us as players. So even before we made contact with our now enemies, before we made first contact by them when they raided colony, I have to think of what colonies. I'm going to create a backstory for this initial non-peaceful first contact. Even before we made first contact with them nearly 3 decades ago, relations between the central government in Seoul and the outer colonies was strained. And so there's 2 aspects of this. There's the all the colonies outside Seoul are considered the outer colonies, but there's the outer colonies in the Reach. The ones that aren't connected by the Nexus Bridge network. They're small in population, but fairly rich in resources because they're newly discovered, and their population can't boom because they don't have planets that can't be terraformed and such, or they just haven't been, maybe those ventures are underway, but it takes time. But there's also the outer colonies, which are the old colonies, is what they're called, the old colonies, which are the ones on the Nexus Bridge network. So citizens of the outer colonies resented the people of Seoul and the handful of old colonies on the established Nexus Bridge network, believing that far too much of their resources from their systems went to defending those systems, and building up the infrastructure there. So the outer colonies, the colonies in the Reach, resent Seoul and the old colonies because so much of the resources are brought back from the outer colonies to build up the Nexus Bridge network, to build up the old colonies, those big planets with large populations, and Seoul and such, as well as to they think too much of the resources are going towards the defense of those colonies. And it's, kind of makes sense because there's more humans there. There's more Terrans there. There's more to protect. And that's, where, the army bases are, and the majority of the army, that's where the majority of the Navy bases are. The Navy will send out, Navy units on patrol to the outer colonies, but there aren't any permanent, they're not permanent assignments. And so the outer colonies feel very much exposed, not only from raids and ultimately conquest as well by these enemy aliens, but there are pirates in this universe. And so pirates are constantly raiding commerce and raiding means of production in the outer colonies. And the Navy struggles to respond in time. The Army doesn't maintain a permanent presence. And so, these outer colonists have to rely on mercenaries and mall cops to protect them. And as you can think, it's not going all that well. And there's even growing tension between the old colonies and Sol, with the people and governments of those systems more frequently expressing concerns of Sol regarding Sol exercising too much authority over local politics. So because the Alliance Senate and the central government is in Sol, these other systems feel that even too much they don't have enough autonomy to govern their own systems. That there's too much. The power has become too centralized within Sol, and they don't have enough autonomy to govern their own systems. They do have some autonomy, but because the government hasn't the governmental system hasn't evolved and grown to match and meet the needs as the Alliance has grown, as the humanity has grown. And it'll probably get there, but these are the growing pains, the teething pains. And so not only are we having these teething pains between Sol and the old colonies, as well as Sol and the old colonies and the outer colonies, but we also have a species that is trying to take our territory, take our resources, and enslave our people for their own benefit. So we got a lot of problems, and here's where we get to the solution. The solution, or we'll get more towards the solution, which is we are part of the solution as our character and as players. We are the first big step into that solution or a solution. Papa Juggernaut says, got to drop a lurk while I attempt for the fourth time to get some in-game footage. Oh, over in SC? What are you trying to get footage of, if you don't mind me asking? That's one of the reasons I don't create too many Star Citizen videos, is because getting in-game footage is hard. My videos have been using images that I've gotten and mostly official SE content. So yeah, because that's what's easiest to get. Continue on. The structure of the Alliance military also wasn't helping the current situation. While the military was technically under a central command that was overseen by the Alliance Senate, each system with representation, so the old colonies, was responsible for providing the manpower and training for the Army and Navy units assigned to that system's defense, as well as the majority of their funding. So the Army and Navy units within those systems, that are assigned to those systems, the manpower comes from those systems. The money, most of the money and the funding comes from those systems, and in order to it gives them, this is one of the ways that the government gave them more autonomy and more incentive to have autonomy and to exercise some self-governance by imparting much of the responsibility for their own defense on those systems with the aid of the central government. So yeah, this was done to try. It was also done to try and prevent a central government from abusing individual systems with military power. And prior to the conflict with the enemy species here, insert name for the enemy species here, the system had worked well. So we have a central navy, we have a navy and an Alliance Navy and Alliance Army, but the units in this system are made up of people from that system. They are largely funded from that system, and they are tasked with the defense of that system, even though they are under the command of the Alliance military. they are required to be able to be deployed. They are under the command of the Alliance military. It's still the Alliance Navy and Marines, but they do have a sort of divided loyalty because this is where they're based out of. This is where they're from. This is where their resources come from, and it's worked well. These systems have buy-in for their own defense. Now, the threat of attack by this enemy species and fear of capture and enslavement on the minds of colonists everywhere, the system is showing its weaknesses, or its weakness is showing its weakness. Members of the military were forced, burdened with the decision of protecting their home system and deploying to defend someone else, often another people they had resentment for. So these old colonies that have Army and Navy units stationed in their systems for their defense, those units are hesitant to forward deploy and send Army units to respond to these attacks and Navy units out on patrol, because those units are then not there at their home system for their own defense. And so their willingness to go on these deployments has been in question, and their willingness to fight on behalf of these other people, even though they are citizens of the Alliance. They are humans. It's more like why would I risk my neck for you when my home could come under attack? So members of the military are burdened with the decision of protecting their home system and deploying to defend someone else, often another people they had resentment for. And political leaders had on more than one occasion made attempts to block deployments to curry favor with their constituents with promises to protect them rather than one of the outer colonies in the Reach. So there's conflict of interest. There's divided loyalties within the Alliance Army and the Alliance Navy. And that's part of the reason, along with the technological changes, that has led to the rapid expansion and redevelopment of the Alliance Marine Corps. So the Alliance Marines don't suffer from the same troubles, at least not to the extent that the other services did or do. I don't know why I was writing it in past tense. The Marines are centrally funded, so all their funding comes directly from the Alliance central government. And they are a much smaller force, and they are based in a system that doesn't have Alliance representation. There is no permanent colonial presence there. There's a large station that is theirs, as well as a multiple asteroid and planet-side bases that are belong to the Alliance Marines, where they train and they're housed. But it isn't there. There isn't a colonial presence there. There isn't any representation there. So Marines are recruited from all across the Alliance. And so you don't have these homogenous units within the Marines. And so while still under the Alliance military structure, and so they are still part of the Alliance military. They work serve alongside other Alliance military units. The Marine units receive their orders directly from the commandant, and those orders are derived from the Marines' new charter. They established a new charter once this new mission set came to be, versus what they had been doing before, which was really mostly shipboard defense, and almost like a military police force. And so they developed a new charter, and I'll write more about the charter later, but it boils down to this: serve and defend humanity against all threats. And so that's why the Alliance Marines are different from the Marines of centuries past, in that they serve and they serve and defend humanity against all threats. So the Alliance Marines have their own ships, and they are not dependent on the Navy for their own transport. as well as naval defense. And those ships are operated by Marine auxiliaries. You are only a Marine if you are you're only truly a Marine if you are in the combatant arms of the combatant arms of the Marines in terms of the ground units. Your infantry, your artillery, your armored units, special forces, all that. If you are in a service and support unit, you do the maintenance on the ships or their aircraft. If you're in logistics, you are a Marine auxiliary. And combat arms. The only other Marines that are wibbly wobbly combat arms, Marine pilots. So if you're flying a dropship or a fighter, a bomber, you are also a Marine. You go to the same boot camp. You learn. The pilots are recruited from the ranks of the combat arms to go to pilot training because they want those pilots to understand how important their job is in terms of providing air cover and support for the mission, whether it's a ground mission or it's a space-based mission, because the fighters and the bombers do space superiority. They will attack enemy ships and other enemy craft and escort dropships and such. And so the pilots, they were in the trenches. They've served, and so they know, they have a love for their fellow Marines on the ground, as well as they know how important it is to protect their ships, so that way they can execute their mission. And that's why the Marine, and they do consider, instead of having a hospital corps and you have Navy corpsmen, we have Marine corpsmen now, and a Marine hospital corps, because that's part of the serve and defend humanity against all threats. There are the Marines now have their own engineers. They have their own medical corps, as well as the combatant arms and an air wing and a space, a space force, to be able to serve and defend humanity in any means that humanity needs. And that's the reason that the word humanity is used. It's not just the Alliance. You don't have to be a Alliance aligned system, or colony. If humans need help, the Marines will respond. If humans need help, in terms of defense from pirates or the enemy species, the Marines will come and defend them. If humanity is experiencing a natural disaster, people need to be evacuated, there's a plague, or an earthquake, Marine scientists, Marine auxiliary scientists and engineers will come to help. Marine medical teams will come to help. Marine dropships will, your hero ship will come to evacuate people off the planet, whether it's bringing them onto your hero ship or evacuating them onto a civilian transport. Whatever humanity needs in their darkest times, the Marines will come, and that is part of your mission out on the Reach. This first Expeditionary Marine Force you're there to provide that force and readiness for the people that aren't defended. Permanently, they aren't permanently defended. They aren't permanently served by the Alliance military. Those people are living out on the edge. They're taking risks in order to, and that those risks have significant rewards in terms of resources. But the Marines are going out there to be that response when those people are in need, and to be able to rapidly redeploy to meet the needs of any type of mission, whether it's space combat, whether it's deploying a medical team to the surface, whether it's a boarding operation after pirates have captured a civilian space station. The Marines will be there, and all of those things are gameplay missions and elements that I want to include in the game. So that's the Alliance of Terran Systems, a brief overview of the Alliance military and the sort of fledgling Alliance Marines, because this first expeditionary Marine force is the first of its kind. And the AMS Nassau, the Alliance Marines ship Nassau, is the first of its kind. And so through war games and a bunch of research and development, this first task force has been developed. And your escorts are they're ships just like the Navy would have. They're the same frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and corvettes that the Navy would employ, but they are being your Marine auxiliary crew are newly trained. That they have been people that have been volunteered from the Navy, who have come over and become Marine auxiliaries and trained newly recruited Marine auxiliaries to fulfill these roles. And this is a brand new unit. And so there's a lot of pressure on you as your character as the player to be successful. Not only do you want to help humanity, but there's pressure on you coming down from the commandant and the Alliance government to be successful because we need to. The Alliance wants to shore up relations with the outer colonies, and they want to sort of relieve the old colonies of the burden of defending the outer colonies. So that way those units, the Navy and Army units, can go on greater campaigns to do things that are to fight back against the enemy in greater capacity than the Marines are capable of. The Alliance Marines are still a small force, both in terms of fleet capacity as well as ground capacity, growing very quickly. A lot of resources are being devoted towards it. But the Alliance Marines don't have the ability to go, on campaign. It's we're still a rapid response force, but if you as the player and this character can prove yourself, if your unit can prove that this concept works, there's already more ships and troops and personnel are being recruited and trained and constructed. But if this doesn't work out, if you can't prove the concept, if you can't achieve mission success in the eyes of your superiors, the project will be canceled, and there won't be more Marine ships, there won't be more Nassau class ships, there won't this thing will be dead in the water. So, and that's the last thing we're going to talk about is your ship, your hero ship. Last episode, we briefly went over some concept art for it and looked at some pictures, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the AMS Nassau and the Nassau class assault ships. Now, I talked about, and I haven't filled this out yet, but it's going to be pretty extensive, and I've talked about it, and I'm going to bring up, I'll read some of the prompts that Mustang 6 shared with me to help guide him in, creating concept art for the ship. And so we'll bring up some images, but we're going to go over those prompts, and I'm going to talk about some of the capacity, the capabilities of this ship, from my notes, and how that, what that means for gameplay. And that'll be the last thing we talk about this evening. So let's look at the prompt. I'm not going to pull up our Discord conversation, but I'm going to pull up the prompts and my response to them. So the first one was round or boxy. And my reply was more boxy, almost hexagonal if looking at it from the nose. And one of the images I really like, and I'm going to pull up the Pinterest board. So here's our Pinterest board we've started. We've got some Marines, and some grizzled looking people here. And we've got a bunch of ships and stuff that sort of start giving ideas and formulating all what we're going to, when I say we, mostly Mustang 6 is going to create in terms of art for this universe and to give it a visual style. So when I say hexagonal, if you look at this image, you can see that it's almost, you've got a almost six-sided image of this ship. You have sort of a top side, an angle coming down like that, an angle coming in, and a bottom side. Hexagonal or even either irregularly hexagonal or octagonal. Here's another image of, I really like this one. But another thing that I really like in terms of design is, if you look at this one, I like this, and I'd like to see it a bit more pronounced, and you can see it a little bit in this one as well. But hexagonal or octagonal in terms of the on-side facing, but also if you're looking at it from the side, an irregular shape. So that way it almost looks like there are like three large sections connected by a more, it comes in and out and then in and then out. And so you have more of a drive engineering section. Yeah. I like this shape too. Mustang 6 says. And so let's see, where's another good example? Open the image. Here's another one. And you can see how it comes out right here and out right here. And I like to see that maybe a little bit more pronounced and separated, but we don't want it to be over elongated. But I'd like to, if this was a front section, I'd like to come up like that and have a little bit more of a nose to it, a little bit more of a rear. And the reason, I like the aesthetic of it, but B, I'm going to pull up, and this is partly the aesthetic and also the to create a lot of interior space, because it's the ship would have lots of modular space on the interior, as well as the exterior weapon systems would be able to be mounted on these sort of flat facings, and you can swap those out at a probably equipped station. Oh, here's a really good one. So you can see how you have, I wish I had a full side-on image of it. And these are all concept art from the Astro Empire's web-based game. But you can see how you have these irregular angles coming down and then flat and then back up. But I like how this one almost looks like there's three sort of main sections, and you could make this rear section and this nose section a little bit bigger and more prominent. Just coming up, not quite as big as this main section in the middle, but to sort of, give you a almost sort of guide as to what would be where. And I'll show you why here. Let's pull up the image. Here's a really good one. So I will never forgive Microsoft for shooting down this. Oh, I want this open in. Hold on, I'm going to open up not in Paint. Photos. There we go. Make that nice and big. So this is concept art, and there's several more images, and you can just Google it. But if you Google canceled Halo Wars 3 concept art, I think it'll bring up an article that has a bunch of these images. And so if you imagine this ship, using that same sort of styling, and you've got your sort of, I'm not a huge fan of nacelles coming off. I would like the maneuvering thrusters to be mounted on the sides and top of the ship, for, your turning, your 6 degrees of freedom movement. And that will make sense when we talk about the gameplay in the next episode. But if we had nacelles, that would sort of get in the way, because the ship has many compartments, and these compartments in the game will able to be configured by you at an appropriately equipped station with a dry dock. And so when you start the game, your ship is being launched out of the shipyard at the naval station at Ceres, which is a big asteroid in the asteroid belt in the solar system. And when it's launched, it only has a few basic modules, a basic module set, and we're going to get more. First part of your mission is to leave Ceres with a handful of your escorts. You don't have your full task force with you. The others are out on maneuvers in the outer colonies, and you're going to rendezvous with them. But so you've got these modules, and so you've got a number of small, medium, and large modules that you can, your base configuration will have like one hangar, which would be like a large module, one troop compartment, which would be like a medium module, and a cargo bay, which could be a large or a medium module, and your command module, which is where you are able to look at your star map, and maybe a few other like basic things, your basic configuration just to get you started. And you're heading to the Marine home station in that system I talked about, where where the Marines are headquartered, where you will get the rest of your modules installed at your discretion based off how you want to be outfitted for your mission. And there will be more to that story later when we get into sort of the further on in the prologue and the narrative for how this all works. But that's, as you're getting your briefing and your mission design, that's part of it. Is you only have your base mission modules installed at Ceres Station. You need to go to this next station to get more of them. After you rendezvous with you'll rendezvous with some of your other escorts there. But that's part of the gameplay. Is throughout the campaign, you will be able to gather resources after earning the support of these various systems from, helping them, rescuing them from pirates or a raid by the enemy, or sending a medical team and helping with injured or sick personnel, all this sort of stuff. By doing that, you'll gain a support from these various systems and colonies, and you'll be able to use the resources that you get from them when you go to different dry dock equipped stations across the verse. You'll have to decide when you want to go and visit these ones in order to have different mission modules installed to increase the capabilities and capacity of your hero ship. So you can add more hangars in order to have more dropships and fighters and bombers. And you'll have dropships and heavy dropships. And you'll need, your regular dropships can move people. Your heavy dropships are what move vehicles. And so if you want to, bring on more, 2 more tanks, because they'll come in pairs, you'll have to have heavy dropships. Yeah, more dropships. Always more dropships. But it's a player agency of, okay, if I use up all my hangar space, if the hangars take up large modules, you only have so many, and you'll have your sort of cargo or storage modules, and you get a lot more bang for your buck if you use a large module for cargo storage, because you'll have to have supplies in order to sustain your task force, because you are forward deployed for your embarked troops, but as well as the other ships in your task force. And so if you don't carry enough supplies with you, your deployment range before you have to return to a station for resupply is limited. You'll also be limited on how many, you'll have dropships, but if you'll be limited on how many troops you can carry with you, how long you can deploy them, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of player agency and decision making on how you want to configure your hero ship, much like if you have played XCOM. Same concept. You do missions, you get resources from those missions. The mission reward is, you get, the first, payout of those resources, and then you get more over time as long as you maintain the support of that system. So if a pirates come back and raid that system, you don't go defend them, you'll lose that support, you'll lose that resource. But you don't have to it isn't a derelict ship. You don't have to clear it out or anything like that. But you start the game with only your base mission modules. So that's a big component of the gameplay and the decision making. And based off of, okay, I want to install this module. Well, I need these resources, and it's only available in these systems. And so you, as a player, have to plan where you want to go to get those resources. And there won't always be a mission available to get those resources. And you can buy them, but you have a limited amount of credits from your funding stream coming from the Marines. So there's a lot of player agency involved in how you configure your ship, and you can configure it to your play style. If you want to do more support missions, you have less of a combatant capacity, you might want to have 2 medical bays or 2 research bays, which is where your engineers and your scientists are. If you want to go further into the reach, you might trade out, and you can trade out these modules. They're not permanent. But to go on a longer deployment, you might want to trade out one of your hangars for a larger cargo storage bay. A pool and crayon dispensary. If you want to utilize, one of your base modules will be a shock, your shock pod module, which is where you will fire your shock pods to board enemy ships. And if you're in space combat, it'll pause the space combat for you to do the tactical combat on board the enemy ship in order to achieve a certain objective. Or to do drop pods in order to land Marines on a ground map. And so you'll have a certain at certain opportunities you'll have the ability to drop your ODSTs behind enemy lines for reinforcements, or to achieve a bonus objective or something like that. So think about, but if you want to be able to deploy more boarders, more drop pods, you'd have to install another module, if that's your playstyle. If you want to provide more space combat support when you're in fleet engagements, your hero ship has very limited offensive capacity as a ship. You really are, you're great for close-in weapon support in terms of defending your fleet against fighters, bombers, and torpedoes. But you don't have big ship-to-ship guns, because those big ship-to-ship guns require giant magazines and take up lots of power. And that takes away from you being able to do what your main job is to support your task force of ships with ship-to-ship guns and weapons, as well as being able to deploy troops in a spaceborne capacity. So you can choose, what sort of flak, CWIS type systems you have. You can employ some very small ship-to-ship weapons, to use against like gunboats and corvettes, but they're very limited range. Think about it if you're looking at it from a Star Citizen perspective. You aren't equipping anti-capital guns. You can equip, anything from like your size, 3-4 anti-fighter all the way up to 5-6 medium largest ship guns. But another capability that your ship has, because you have this giant, these giant antimatter reactors, and this ability to transmit energy very quickly across your ship via you can generate a lot of energy. You can transmit it via the plasma conduits, and you can also, so you could install more plasma conduits in these very small, or not conduits, more plasma capacitors in these sort of small modules in between. And that can allow you, if you have enough capacity, you could choose to install a module that allows you to transmit energy across space, across a short distance, to bolster the shields of your escorts. So while you're in space combat, your ship is very strong in its defenses. You have big, heavy shields, you have heavy armor, you move slow. And so if you get out of position with your escorts, your ship can become vulnerable because you have only some projection of force capability with your fighters, with your bombers, really, and your boarders. You really rely on your escorts for your defense and offensive capability for the most part, with some special abilities essentially from your hero ship. But you can augment their defense with your close-in weapon systems. If you get in close with them, you stay in close formation, as well as transmitting energy to bolster their shields when they become low. There's also an option, because you have these big old storage rooms and you're storing all these extra supplies and material for the task force. Your ships are, you have your, they have what I call them. You have your, I call them macro hull. What was the word I used? Your macro hull sections and your micro hull sections. And so basically you have, your hull is 2 layers. And so the inner layer is, in the way you install, these modules is you can remove an entire hull section in order to gain access to that interior compartment. And that's how a shipyard would install a module. And basically they come, they are able to be shipped by container ships to the various stations where you would be installing them. And so a shipyard would remove a whole section to install that module and get it set up and configured so that way it functions, connected to power and all that sort of thing. And then reseal it by replacing that hull section. But the hull section has 2 pieces. You have your macro hull section, which is your inner hull, and it's armored, but it isn't as tough. So you have your macro hull section, which is your inner hull, and your outer hull has micro hull sections, and those are more armored. They're more heavily armored, but they are designed to they're smaller pieces. Think of it like you've got like a hexagonal weave, and so that way they have they're designed to take hits and fracture in order to absorb energy and impacts after they get through shields, and then fracture without transmitting that energy to other micro hull sections. And so that way, that's how your ships are, your armor, your exterior armor and your inner hull are able to be easily repaired, in that those sections are essentially modular and can be easily replaced. Now, you can't replace an entire exterior hull section out in space, but what you do have is you carry micro hull, your micro sections. You can carry those in your cargo storage bay, and then your drones can deploy from your hangar to provide spot repairs to your the ships in your task force. So your ship provides a very large support role in space-based combat, but is slow, not very maneuverable, and vulnerable. And so if you're trying to keep, a lot of times your tactic will be to keep you away, keep your escorts in between the enemy and you, while providing strike craft support, sending out boarders, as well as deploying drones for repair, deploying energy to bolster shields for your combatants, without getting yourself in the line of fire. But you have to it's player agency, because your escorts are very limited in their maneuvering ability if they stay close to your hero ship. And so they become much easier to target by moving so slowly. But you also don't want to leave your hero ship vulnerable, and you don't want to extend your reach to where your hero ship can't provide support. So there's a lot of player agency and choice in how to conduct space combat, both in terms of configuration, but also your play style. And there is a lot of risk, because if your hero ship gets destroyed, disabled, game over. Game over, man. Game over. If that makes sense. So let's see. So yeah. We'll talk a few more minutes about some of the prompts from Mustang 6. He asked cartoony or photo real, Bad Batch versus Empire Strikes Back. And I said more photo real, but the level of detail of photo real isn't necessary in terms of, I don't think of the concept art that I showed you, like this and I don't think of this as cartoony. I think if you zoomed, if it was in full level of detail, if you zoomed in, you'd have all the greebling and it would look photorealistic, but it's not cartoony. It isn't like No Man's Sky kind of cartoony. I wonder if there's any examples of that here. I think of that as more closer to photoreal. Let's see. Will it float? Can it land in water or VTOL? And I said space only, no ability to land or hover. This is a massive ship. In the early portion of the prologue, I think I described it as like 2.5 kilometers wide or long, and 0.5 kilometer across at the widest point of midships, like your biggest midsection. So it's a big ship. It's a couple of times larger than an America class assault ship that we have right now. So it's big. And your drop ships are able to VTOL and hover. They've got lots of thrusters and all like that. But this is much too heavy. We don't have any sci fantasy gravity drive that allows it to Star Destroyer, hover in low atmosphere. For the Marine fighters, and not only the Marine fighters but the Marine bombers, your light and heavy drop ships, do they land like Battlestar Galactica Vipers or drop like TIE fighters? And they come to a hover and land. And so I don't really have a good picture of it, but a lot of these pictures you can see there's the side opening for the hangar. And if you can imagine in this image, if you had like a big hangar here and another big hangar here and this more forward module and maybe another one more towards the rear, you'd have sort of multiple spaces like this. Here, let's zoom in. Let's see. Oh, wait, no, I have one of these saved. Here, I'll open it up. Here we go. This one. So this is side profile of the Astro Empires. This is their fleet carrier. And so if you imagine, the module sort of space like this, and if it was sort of like irregularly 8-sided, I do really like this sort of concept, this aesthetic, where the hangar would be and what the fighters would look like coming out. Yeah. So if you can imagine, the hangar module is larger than this entrance space, but the ships can deploy in and out on both sides. It's passed through, but the ships and drones are stored and maintained in the sort of non-pass-through portion. So they land here, and then they move off to the storage part, maintenance areas over here. So the hangar module would occupy a larger space than what you just see right here. But I think in a game, if you have space-based combat that you can zoom in and you can see them coming into land, especially if it's at like a 3/4 isometric style view, it would look really cool. And imagine you maybe this nose section gets a little bit bigger, and then this tapers off and comes back in, and you have a wider section back here, and you could have, a large hangar module here, another large hangar module here. You've got a large cargo module here, a large one here, and another large. You have like 5 large modules that you could install, and you could choose how you want to configure them. And then, because the ship from the front, if you see it, the widest portion is that sort of that mid octagon right here, and then it narrows up this way. These are why you would have your medium and your smaller modules up here and then up here. And then, same below. And you could even make it so that way your main midsection here, main rear section here, and main front section here, these are the ones with the modules, and maybe the midsections aren't modular. They don't have the modular capacity. Those are like the permanent spaces that aren't modular, like your crew quarters and such. Hey, no more bueno. Thanks for the follow. Thanks for the support.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Let's see. Ooh. Okay. 6, do you mind if I put these images up on screen that you just sent me? Because I'm already picking up what you're throwing down. I love it. I like that you use that, because I use that same saying all the time. Okay. No more bueno says, good day from down under. Good day. Thank you. Thanks for coming and hanging out, buddy. Good to see you. So let's see. Open in browser. See, I like this. I'm assuming, and I don't have a great artistic eye, but this is sort of like a top-down view. Is that what you're looking at? Because I like how it not only tapers, you'd have tapering vertically, tapering up and down, but also if you had a full top-down view, you'd see the tapering in and out horizontally, laterally, right? Yeah. Especially with the big wide drive section, because you'd have the big thrusters at the end. Very cool. I like where this is going. Oh, this is cool too, because you have a wide section here, but it comes to a nose and a regular shape on that front end. That's super cool too, because it's still, you have this more narrower section in here. And you could even say, like, maybe lore-wise, construction-wise, this front section is designed to be completely sealed off if it sustains too much battle damage, and you could evacuate these spaces back into here, seal it off, and eject it, or something. I don't think that'd be necessary as a game mechanic, but it's a cool little piece of lore to help explain why it's built this way in terms of like a damage control aesthetic or design philosophy. Whoops, I closed the wrong thing. E8 CSM paint job. Oh, where did? Aha! I like it. Let's read some more of those prompts. Let's see. And that we can give the people in chat and watching later on YouTube an idea of where you're coming from as far as your process for getting to this point. Let's see. Does the Nassau, pardon me, have a namesake? If she were a ship today, which one Which one would she be? And so my response was the USS Nassau was an LHA landing. I forget what that stands for, but it's basically a U.S. Marine assault ship. It's a Navy assault ship, but carries embarked Marines. It's basically a helicopter carrier. It was decommissioned a bit over a decade ago. I think it was 2011. The Nassau in the Bahamas is a port, and it was the site of the first amphibious landing by the U.S. Marines back during the Revolutionary War. But the Nassau, the AMS Nassau, our hero ship in game, is named after an in-fiction, highly successful, large-scale boarding operation by Alliance Marines of a spaceport stationed by the same name after it was taken over by a human terrorist faction. And I'm going to actually write up the lore for this event because it'll be in the glossary. The modular room compartment design is inspired in part by the expeditionary sea-based class of ships, like the Chesty Puller, I think is what it is. And the Nassau is really an assault ship and an expeditionary space base in terms of function. And I'm going to put a link in chat, and I'll pull it up on the stream so you guys can see it. And odd that it has the wrong thumbnail for the ship. But it's a really cool documentary that I think goes a long way to showing what I'm talking about in terms of inspiration, both in terms of like how the ships are designed as well as the mission set. So here's the link to the documentary. And the documentary is actually about the French Navy BPC class of ships, which are assault ships, helicopter carriers that can also deploy landing craft and troops and all that. And I'm going to put that right here. I'm not going to play it. And oddly enough, the thumbnail image when you pull it up is wrong. But let's see, this is
vessel all at once.
It's a really, no, I want that image. There we go. So very similar in design. This is actually smaller than the America class. And I forget what the previous class of assault ships, the LHDs were, but it's still a very capable ship. And the idea is that the AMS Nassau is able to deploy landing craft just like this ship, as well as attack craft. Yeah, the Wasp class. There you go. Thank you. And this ship is very similar to the, oh gosh, Blizzard, you're in chat. What's the Canberra? The Canberra class, which is the basically equivalent ship that the Australian Navy uses. And these are actually quite common in current navies. It's just they don't get much fanfare compared to, destroyers and, super carriers and submarines. But every major navy on planet Earth now operates these ships, or ships very much like them that perform a similar mission and role. And so that's why I wanted to create a universe where these would be needed, and that's the function of the AMS Nassau in the game. So let's read a couple more of the prompts. How many crew and auxiliary crew? And because the ship is a couple times larger than an America class assault ship like we have nowadays, ship's crew, which would be Alliance Marine auxiliaries, including officers, plus or minus about 2K, depending on 2,000, depending on configuration. Now, obviously, that isn't going to be something that you as the player have to control, but in lore, how you configured your ship would dictate how many auxiliaries you had versus as well as how many embarked Marines you could carry. So if you wanted to carry more troops, you would configure your ship to do that, but it would mean less mission modules that would be manned by auxiliaries. And so your Marines would take up more of the troops berthing space than ship's crew. Embarked Marines are also up to plus or minus 2K, a reinforced Alliance Marine battalion with various attachments, tank, your armor, and troop carriers, your space wing, air wing, whatever you want to call it, artillery, special forces, what have you, depending on configuration. Again, same thing. How does she dry dock? Pardon me. So I said she can perform regular maintenance, and this is more of an in-lore thing, and some emergency repairs underway, like we talked about with the drones replacing armor sections. But installation and a removal of mission modules, anything from another hangar and launch bay to troop compartment, etc., medical bay or research facility, and heavy repair. So like replacing, repairing your bulkheads and major systems, all that require a dry dock equipped station as described in the prologue. And dry dock, it's like an external dry dock. It's a gantry system that creates as a framework around the ship for repairs. Lots of robotic arms and drones, and EVA repair going on for micro repairs and system maintenance. It isn't it isn't like you pull into a hangar because it's a gigantic ship. Does the modularity of design encompass the interior, exterior hull, like weapons, or both? Weapons are external hardpoints that can be fairly easily swapped or replaced. So your time in dry dock to replace weapons would be short versus exchanging or installing new mission modules or doing major repairs. And so that's something you'll have to contend with as a player. If your ship takes damage, how far do you let that damage go before you return to a dry dock equipped station? When do you choose to swap out mission modules? How far do you go down a sort of mission chain with what you have versus coming back to it at a later date? We're basically talking an empty compartment within the hull and installing the mission equipment to suit, but everything needed can be essentially containerized. So those modules come in a container that is shipped, but then they have to be installed via the gantry system, and then the dry dock workers have to connect everything up and get it testing and working and functioning. And like I said, Mustang 6 asked, could a modular change occur in space or on land? Like I said, it occurs at an equipped space station. And then the last question, if she was built by one of the Star Citizen spaceship manufacturers, because of course we're Star Citizen fans, we're backers, players, which one would it be? Anvil, 100% Anvil. There's even lore for Anvil making ships like this. I did a video on it. Shameless plug. It's actually my best performing video ever, nearly 20,000 views. And another art influence that I really like aspects of it, but not like, obviously not a carbon copy, is the art for the game Falling Frontier. And so I very much like these ships. If it had more of a flat section here to make it more octagonal versus hexagonal, but then also doing what you saw in these, I think the aesthetic for these is really cool because you can sort of see the paneling. Like if you could see the paneling in the aesthetic, it'd be really cool. But then there is other concept art for other ships where you can see in that sort of flat hexagonal angled section here, you would have like recessed pockets where your turrets would be in place, your self-defense turrets, and like a rolling airframe missile system, what have you. But if this, went big and nosy at the front and big and nosy at the rear, kind of like it does here, I don't need the dual sort of conning tower sensor suite system, but I like the sort of like, this is the command main section. But this is a Hanno class destroyer. If you haven't checked out this game, it looks amazing. Super cool. Yeah, Falling Frontier has a really great aesthetic. They just came out with a new trailer. Let's see. Oh, here it is. So this is on the IGN page. I'll share this link in chat just because we're going to wrap it up here in a second. But if you haven't seen this, go check it out. Super good video. And I wonder if this trailer is on their website. I saw it on IGN first. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll switch back to the other screen and we'll wrap this up for the evening. Alrighty. See, that's really weird because I play the transition when I switch screens. It doesn't show any audios going through the audio input capture, but you guys say you can hear it, so I'm just going to trust you. Alrighty. So we have been streaming for over 3 hours. We covered a lot more than I didn't think covering the things that I wanted to cover was going to take as long as it did, but I think it was a lot of good information. I really appreciate you guys listening and hanging out and being a part of the discussion. I like getting these thoughts out in the open because I'll rewatch this as I'm writing these things down because I'm going off of bullet point notes to prompt the information in my head, and that's what this discussion is what I'll use to help me write it all down in a more coherent and narrative driven way. Yeah, it definitely passionate about it. But yeah, it's been fun, and I'm going to get the next couple of pages of the prologue written, as well as I'm going to hopefully be able to fill in some more of these glossary terms. So like I'll put in a section for each of these, but I think I'm going to work on the Nexus Bridge and Drive more. But I think the next episode I want to talk about the shock pods and the tech that they're used in, as well as the Battle of Centauri, and create some lore around that, because it's mentioned in the prologue. And then we'll go from there. I'll probably do another one of these in the next week or so. But then, just as a reminder, Mustang 6 will be streaming, doing some more of their concept artwork next Saturday, and so I will post the details for that on my Twitter, on the community page for my YouTube, in my Discord. I'll make a Discord event, so keep an eye out for that. I'm hopefully going to be able to watch live and join him live, but if not, I'll catch it later. But if you are interested in what we're doing, please go show some support and check it out, and give them some constructive feedback. And again, I appreciate any support and any interest in the project. So if you have ideas, if you've seen more concept art along these lines that you think would be helpful, if you have questions that you think might help with this concept process, I'd love to hear them. The discussion is best had in the game dev section of my Discord. But yeah, just want to say thank you to everybody. Hope you've enjoyed this, and we will talk more later. And yes, Aether Drift 369 Pathfinders tomorrow night, right here on my Twitch at 10 p.m. Eastern. Nazareth and I are going over the February monthly reports. February. And then the following episode, it will be a week after that, and we're going to get caught up on the roadmap updates for the release view as well. And then I'm hoping I'll have enough time to put together a Spectrum Pulse on it's going to be like a part 2 for where in the world is the quantum simulation, because Ray's Guide did a couple of videos on it, and I love Ray's Guide, but I think he's off base on a few things, and I want to fill in some of the blanks for some people and talk about a little bit of fan theory regarding it that's supported by evidence. Have a look at Obsidian. I put the details in game dev. It will help organize. Oh, perfect. I will take a look at it. Awesome. Thanks, man. But yeah, that's all I have for this evening. Everybody have there's 8 of you guys in chat, so we'll raid somebody. Let's find someone who's playing some actual games, and we'll find somebody to raid, pass the love along. So let's see. Raid, and is there anyone I'm following that's online right now? Oh, Nazareth is playing Space Engineers, and game dev and Space Engineers. Sweet. We're going to keep the theme going. We're going to go raid Nazareth. He's been up for I'm surprised he's still awake. It is really late for him. Let's go say hi to Nazareth.